Hello viewers, welcome to Chris Crime Diaries. This is your Chris Barker. On January 3, 2023, headlines around the United States of America read, Missouri to carry out the first execution of an openly transgendered person in history of the nation. As the day gave way to evening. This execution was controversial for a variety of reasons, but we must not overlook the reason for the controversy. Why? What crime did she commit? Beverly Jo Wedpole was born on the 28th of December 1957. Beverly married and gave birth to 3 sons. Her youngest son drowned in a swimming pool when he was only a year and a half old. Beverly's marriage fell apart as a result of this devastating loss. Beverly worked hard after her divorce to become self-sufficient. Beverly, now a grandmother, began dating Scott McLaughlin in 2002. Scott McLaughlin was born on the 13th of January 1973. He and his 2 siblings were born to an alcoholic father and a prostitute mother. His early childhood was marred by abuse and neglect, and he and his siblings ended up in the foster care system. The McLaughlins eventually adopted the children. Mr. McLaughlin was a St. Louis police officer who allegedly beat his children with paddles and tased them at times. According to Scott, the food was frequently locked up, preventing the children from eating. Hyperactivity, attention deficit disorder, and learning disabilities are all possibilities. He was also discovered to be depressed. His teachers in elementary school described his psychological issues as severe. Scott was arrested at the age of 19 for the rape of a 14-year-old girl. He was convicted and sentenced to prison. Scott was a registered sex offender when he was released. In 2002, he met Beverly Guenther and the two began a whirlwind romance. Beverly's home in Moscow Mills, Missouri, quickly became their home. Scott's adoptive father died in 2002 as well. It is unknown what psychological impact this had on him. Scott and Beverly's relationship quickly deteriorated. The couple began to fight on a regular basis, frequently splitting up for short periods of time and then reuniting. Beverly, on the other hand, ended the relationship permanently in the summer of 2003. Scott, on the other hand, was not about to accept the breakup. He called Beverly at her job in Earth City, Missouri on a regular basis. He would also frequently stop by to speak with her. She begged him to leave her alone, but he didn't. Beverly wrote in a letter in the fall of 2003, "He came up to me and tried to put his arm around me. I asked him not to touch me and to leave me alone. When I was walking to my truck, I asked him what he wanted. He said he forgot to ask me a question. I asked him about the freezer he had taken from my house. At the time, I was attempting to get into my truck. So I walked in, and he continued to talk. When I told him I had to go, he tried to kiss me. I drew back and told him to stop. He then attempted it again. I pushed him and told him to stop. He inquired as to why I was treating him in this manner. I told him I was done and didn't want to see him again, no means no, and I had to leave. He then grabbed my breast and claimed to have played with my titties. I yelled at him and told him to stop. He then walked away and exited. Scott will not accept no for an answer. He doesn't know when to give up." Beverly's neighbor called her at work on October 27, 2003. She stated that she noticed Scott, whom she had previously met, coming in and out of her home with items. Beverly informed her neighbor that Scott was not welcome in her home, and the police were summoned. Scott eluded police in his Ford Escort station wagon, leading them on a chase. A police roadblock was set up. McLaughlin turned himself in at the roadblock. Police discovered $900 in stolen property from Beverly Guenther's home inside the vehicle. Scott was charged with burglary, but he was able to post bail. Beverly, in fact, had prepared victim impact statements and was set to testify against Scott in court in late November. Beverly's neighbor called police again on Thursday, November 20, 2003. This time, she requested that Beverly be checked on because she had not returned from work. Beverly's friends and neighbors were worried because her ex-boyfriend had been harassing and stalking her for months. Police discovered her vehicle in her employer's parking lot, but she was not there. Police discovered a large amount of blood at the scene. This sent shivers down their spines because they realized this was most likely a homicide investigation. Her ex-boyfriend and current stalker was immediately suspected by police of being responsible for her disappearance. He had frequently ambushed her as she was leaving work. They began looking for Scott McLaughlin after receiving information on Friday, November 21st, that he would be at a local hospital seeking mental health care. He was apprehended at the hospital. On Saturday, November 22nd, Scott led police to Beverly Guenther's body. Her death occurred when she was 45 years old. Scott, who was then 29 years old, made a full confession. He admitted to hiding in the bushes at Beverly's workplace. He said he was angry because Beverly played head games. When he jumped out at Beverly, he claimed she was startled and dropped her car keys. He then admitted to pulling a knife on her and dragging her to the ground, where he raped her at knife point. He then repeatedly stabbed her, including in the neck. He loaded her body into the back of his station wagon and drove away. McLaughlin drove to Bellerive Park in South St. Louis. He attempted to dispose of Beverly's body in the Mississippi River here, but he was unable to drag the body all the way down the embankment and it became entangled in some brush. Later, police discovered blood trails, Scott's flashlight, and the murder weapon. Beverly died as a result of massive blood loss from multiple stab wounds, according to the medical examiner. The medical examiner confirmed the rape but was unable to determine whether it occurred before or after the death. Scott McLaughlin was charged with homicide after the death was ruled a homicide. Scott claimed to have a flat tire after disposing of Beverly's body. He claimed to have slept in his car that night before going to a family member's house to sleep some more. He then used bleach to clean his car. Scott confessed to the murder but not to the sexual assault when he was arrested. Scott's vehicle contained blood that was linked to Beverly via DNA. Beverly's seminal fluids were also linked to Scott via DNA. Scott admitted to tossing Guenther's clothes in the trash. The confessions provided by Scott to authorities were shared at trial, along with letters written by Beverly to document Scott's stalking and abuse. Her victim impact statement for the October burglary case was also read aloud, and the jury was informed that Scott was scheduled to appear in court the day after Beverly was killed on those charges. He was convicted of first-degree murder. The state intended to pursue the death penalty. The state presented evidence during the sentencing portion of the trial that Scott had a criminal history, was a registered sex offender, had been harassing and stalking Beverly, and killed Beverly while committing forcible rape. To counteract those aggravating factors, the defense presented psychologists and witnesses who testified that Scott had borderline personality disorder, severe depression, a history of ADHD, brain damage, and had been abused as a child. They claimed that his adoptive parents smeared feces in his face on multiple occasions. In the end, the jury was unable to reach a decision on McLaughlin's punishment. The murder was deemed outrageously and wantonly vile, horrible, and inhuman by the jury. The jury also determined that the factors favoring a life sentence outweighed those favoring death. They were, however, hopelessly divided on the verdict. Missouri is one of only 2 states, along with Indiana, where a judge can impose the death penalty if a jury cannot reach a decision between death and life in prison. Scott McLaughlin was sentenced to death by lethal injection by the judge in this case. The decision to impose the death penalty was undoubtedly contentious, but it was legal under Missouri law. McLaughlin's lawyers filed numerous appeals. McLaughlin won his appeal in 2016, and his death sentence was overturned due to ineffective assistance of counsel. However, this was overturned again on appeal in 2021, and the death penalty was reinstated. Scott began living as Amber McLaughlin in 2021 as well. Amber never legally changed her name or gender, so she is still listed as Scott McLaughlin in court documents. The state of Missouri announced in the fall of 2022 that Amber McLaughlin had exhausted all of her appeals and was scheduled for execution on January 3, 2023. The only chance she had of avoiding the death penalty was clemency from Governor Mike Parsons. Anti-death penalty activists and LGBTQ+ activists rushed to Amber's aid, pleading with Parsons to grant clemency and halt the execution. Amber is described as the first openly transgender woman to face execution in the United States of America in a December 2022 Huffington Post article. Larry Comp, her public defender, stated, "It's wrong for anyone to be executed, but I hope this is a one-time occurrence." Amber has shown great bravery in embracing who she is as a transgender woman despite the possibility of people reacting negatively, and I admire her bravery. It is extremely unusual for a woman to commit a capital offense, such as a brutal murder, and even more unusual for women to rape and murder a woman, as was the case with McLaughlin, a spokesperson for the Missouri Department of Corrections said. McLaughlin was described in the clemency petition as having intellectual challenges, fetal alcohol exposure, abuse and neglect, brain damage, and a history of suicide attempts. According to the petition, McLaughlin was mentally ill and thus should be spared. "We simply implore the governor to find mercy in his heart," one supporter said. Amber is a kind person. "The family and loved ones of her victim, Beverly Guenther, deserve peace," Governor Parsons responded. Furthermore, Parsons stated that McLaughlin stalked and harassed Beverly for the last year of her life. Clemency was denied by the governor. McLaughlin was given a fatal dose of phenobarbital on January 3, 2023, at 6:39 p.m. Amber stated in her final statement, "I am a loving and caring individual. I apologize for what I did," Cole, 2023. McLaughlin was declared dead at 6:51 p.m. Following the execution, Beverly's sister-in-law stated, "I'm a nurse, and my friends are wondering how I can support the death penalty while watching this. I work as a carer. I believe in people's salvation. But he took someone's life violently and deliberately. This has taken a long time." Cull, 2023. Beverly's family members placed flowers on her grave following her execution to commemorate the end of the tragic story. What are your thoughts on the Beverly Guenther's case? I really appreciate your input. Thank you for taking the time to watch. Be a part of the Chris Crime Diaries family and hit the subscribe button now. Catch you on the next one.